From social media privacy checks to getting free copies of credit reports, here's how you can help protect a loved one from fraud. If your parents or older family members are on social media, help them do a privacy checkup on all of their accounts. Make sure their passwords are strong and not easy for others to guess. Search their name online to see if any imposter accounts have been set up. Help them get a copy of their credit report. It's the best way to check if there is any suspicious activity associated with their name. Many sites require a fee, but everyone is entitled to a free copy from each of the 3 credit reporting agencies. You can help them get a free copy of their credit report from annualcreditreport.com. For more fraud tips, go to aarp.org/fraudwatchnetwork.
Hello, my name is Jeff Scott. I'm associate for AARP Illinois. I want to welcome you to this important conversation today on how to protect yourself and your loved ones from being a victim of fraud. Our special guest today is Mr. Scott Verseman, who is Chief of the Fraud and Corruption Section of the United States Attorney's Office for the Southern District of Illinois. He is an expert on fraud, and he will explain what to look out for and what to do if you become the target of a scam. This event is part of AARP Illinois' Maximizing Your Money campaign, an education, outreach, and advocacy effort meant to address pocketbook issues Illinoisans deal with that directly impact all our financial health and quality of life. As I said, today we bring you a fraud expert from the U.S. Attorney's Office, Scott Verseman. And in upcoming events, we will continue bringing you experts and resources to further help you improve your financial and retirement security. For more information on upcoming events, please check out our website at aarp.org/il. Okay, let's get started. And I'm honored to welcome and introduce our special guest today, Assistant U.S. Attorney Scott Verseman. Scott, welcome. Thank you for being here today. Go ahead and tell us a little about yourself and what it is you do.
Sure, Jeff. My official title is Assistant United States Attorney. And basically, that's just a fancy title for a federal prosecutor. I'm a federal prosecutor. I've been with the Department of Justice for about 34 years. Most of my time was spent up in the northern end of our state. I was with the U.S. Attorney's Office for Northern Illinois for about 22 years, working out of Rockford. I'm originally from the St. Louis area, and I wanted to move back home to help take care of my elderly father back in 2013. So I transferred to the U.S. Attorney's Office for the Southern District of Illinois. And our office here in Southern Illinois, we're responsible for prosecuting all of the federal crimes that occur in the 38 counties that make up the southern tip of the state of Illinois. So think about, Madison County, about that level of the state of Illinois, all the way down to the tip to Alexander County. That's our jurisdiction. We have 2 federal courthouses located in East St. Louis, Illinois, and in Benton, Illinois. And as you mentioned, my title since 2018 is I am the Chief of the Fraud and Corruption Unit. So what that means is that myself and the 5 other prosecutors in my unit, we prosecute all of the federal fraud cases that occur in Southern Illinois, including frauds against seniors.
Very good. Long list. Thank you. I'm going to go straight into some questions. I'm not going to waste any time here. And again, appreciate you being here and bringing your expertise. What are you seeing across the country, specifically, I guess, in Illinois, when it comes to scams and frauds? Are there specific types of frauds that we should be on the lookout for here in Illinois?
Yeah, Jeff, I would say that the main thing that we're looking at these days are what we call money mule schemes. And let me explain what a money mule is. A money mule is a term that we use in federal law enforcement to describe a person who is moving money for criminals. And they could be doing this either knowingly or unknowingly. And typically what we're seeing is that a lot of these criminals or criminal organizations, they're located outside the country, and they will develop relationships with people all across the country in the United States, including Southern Illinois and all parts of Illinois. And, you know, they might get to know these people over the internet. They might befriend these people. They might try to get them to become involved in some sort of romantic relationship. They may offer them a job. And once they develop these connections with these individuals, they'll tell them that what they need them to do is to accept some sort of funds and then either run them through their bank accounts or move them, you know, in some other way, and accept the funds from one place and then move them on to another place. And what these funds are, they are funds that the criminals have obtained from other United States citizens. They are fraud proceeds, monies that have been stolen from other individuals. And they're getting these money mules to accept the funds and then transfer them on to them, oftentimes in these foreign countries. And they're doing this so it makes it harder for us as federal law enforcement to track that. And oftentimes they'll have the money mules move the funds via some sort of cryptocurrency like Bitcoin or something like that. So, and sometimes, as I said, these money mules are unknowing participants. They honestly don't know what they're doing is illegal, but sometimes they figure out what they're doing is helping a fraudulent organization. And when that happens, they're knowingly participating in money laundering. And they can be charged with federal crimes, and we have charged some of these folks with federal crimes. That's the predominant thing that we're seeing these days when we review the fraud cases that are coming into our office.
That's pretty scary. Thank you. So I think that leads into my next question. Are you seeing specific fraud or scams that go to seniors? And it sounds like you are. And, you know, if I'm a loved one or maybe a caretaker, what am I looking out for and what can I do?
Okay. Jeff, these schemes have been around for a while, but unfortunately we see them all the time. One of the most sinister ones is something that we call the romance fraud scam. And I kind of alluded to this before in my prior answer, but what'll happen is you'll have criminals that are out there trolling the internet, and they'll go on these internet dating sites and they'll other types of platforms, and they'll reach out to seniors through these platforms under the guise of trying to start a romantic relationship with a senior. You might have somebody who has, you know, been widowed or a widower for a long time. They're lonely. They're vulnerable to this type of individual. So these individuals go on and they pose as somebody who's interested in a relationship, when in reality they're just a criminal looking for money. They'll lie about their identity. They'll lie about what they do for a living. They'll also even lie about what they look like. And what we see oftentimes is they'll take a picture of an attractive person that they just, you know, clip off the internet. And they'll send that picture to the senior saying, this is me, when in fact, you know, that's just a person's picture they found on the internet. And then they'll do what we call grooming them, which is just, you know, develop them over a period of time and try to convince the senior that they're really in love with them and that they really are in a true relationship. Then after a certain period of time, what they'll do is they'll ask for money. And that's what it's all about. They want to get the senior's money. And they'll have some sort of excuse to get the money. Oftentimes what we see, Jeff, is that it'll be some sort of medical emergency. The person will say, I've had a medical emergency. My insurance is not covering this or that, or it might be the medical emergency of one of their claimed loved ones. And they'll get the senior to send them thousands of dollars to cover this medical emergency. Well, if the senior sends the money, what'll happen is after a short period of time, the scammer will come back to the senior and say, well, now I need money for this. And if the senior sends more money, they'll come back. And it'll continue and it'll continue. And unfortunately, we've seen many times where the seniors are just completely wiped out financially because these criminals are sinister and they'll just try to get every dime that the senior has. So that's a particularly bad one that we see, and it's very tragic. One of the other ones that we see is something that's called the grandparent scam. And just to give you an example of how pervasive this is and how it can happen to anybody, this actually happened to my father. So my father has a son who's a federal prosecutor who's telling him to look out for fraud scams, and he falls victim to this. But again, it's just evil what they'll do. I'll just explain what happened to my dad because it's a pretty good illustration of how these work. One of these scammers called up my dad, who was living down in Waterloo, Illinois at the time, and the scammer pretended to be my brother, Doug. And now my dad was a Korean War veteran. He was very hard of hearing, worked in a metal shop all of his life, so he had a hard time with his hearing. So my dad kind of thought it must be my hearing why this individual doesn't sound like Doug. But even if you have a senior that doesn't have hearing problems, they'll come up with some excuse for why they don't sound exactly like the person's grandson or the person's daughter, such as, I'm having problems with my phone, or I have a cold or something like that. Well, anyway, this scammer convinced my dad that he was my brother, and that he had gone to Mexico on work, and that he was riding in a cab in Mexico, and the Mexican police, excuse me, stopped the car that my dad was riding in. There was marijuana found in the car, which wasn't my brother's, but the police took my brother to jail, and now he was in jail in Mexico and needed $1,600 to get him bailed out. So my dad fell for it. He went to the bank, withdrew $1,600, and he went to where the fraudster told him to go to wire those funds down to Mexico, or actually the guy was actually in Canada. But fortunately, the person at the bank realized what was going on and put a stop to it. So we were very fortunate there. But unfortunately, we see many, many folks that fall victim to what we call the grandparent scam. And there's different variations of it, but always what it is it's a family member or a loved one who has some type of emergency, and they need you to send money. And they'll tell you now, for some reason, you can't talk to anybody else about it. It has to be kept a secret. So that's another one that you really need to be on the lookout for. The third one, this is the last one I'll mention, but the third one that we see commonly is what we call the lottery scams. And this involves a contact with a senior stating that you've won the lottery. Either it'll be a contact via email or something in the mail, or they'll call you on the phone. They'll say that you won the lottery or you've won some sort of big prize, like an automobile or something like that. But before you can get your prize or get your lottery winnings, there are taxes that are due, or there are fees that are due. And they'll get the senior to send, hundreds or sometimes thousands of dollars to pay the taxes or the fees. And then if they get the senior to send an initial payment, there'll be some sort of excuse. Well, there's an additional fee or an additional tax that we didn't think of. And they'll try to get as much money out of the senior as they can that way. So I would say that those are probably the three primary schemes that we see that target seniors.
Yeah, that's very scary because it's, if it can happen to your dad, good grief. I want to move on to, and thank you for those examples of what to look out for. And, and I know that banks, tellers and alike have to go through special training to look out for situations like that. So thank goodness for that. And thank goodness your dad wasn't taken advantage of fully. I want to move on. And when you're giving your resume, it sounds like about the time the pandemic hit, you started your new position at the office. Has the pandemic, have you seen an increase during the pandemic, or has that changed anything? What can you tell us about that?
Yeah, Jeff, we've seen a big increase in fraud during the pandemic. And a lot of that is related to the pandemic relief funds that Congress passed into law and was signed into law by the president. And your listeners probably know about or have heard of the CARES Act, but the CARES Act provided a lot of help for businesses and for individuals during the pandemic when businesses were shut down and people were put out of work. Part of that was to provide additional unemployment assistance for people affected by the pandemic. And there was a part of that provided funds for even for individuals who didn't have traditional jobs. They called them gig workers, people that were self-employed, but for example, somebody that worked in a band, but they couldn't play anymore because the venues were closed. So they call that the gig worker payments. What we have seen, Jeff, is that the scammers have figured out how to fraudulently claim unemployment benefits that they're not entitled to. And surprisingly, a lot of these schemes are also being run from outside of the country. There's several cases that our office has that are originated out of Africa, and Eastern Europe is scammers over there are also into that. But basically what they'll do then is they will obtain the identities of individuals who've had their identities stolen, such as the person's name, social security number, date of birth. And then they will submit an application to the state for unemployment in that person's name. And every state in the union has been hit with this, some more than others, because some have been a little bit more lax in terms of their security. But what we're also seeing is once they sign up for the unemployment, they need to move that money back to them, and they want to launder it so it doesn't get traced back to them. So this is another area that they're using money mules for. They'll get a money mule to allow them to deposit the unemployment funds into their bank account and then have that money mule transfer the funds back to them wherever they're located, usually by some of these cryptocurrencies. And we're prosecuting several of the individuals who are doing this. Obviously, these individuals, you know that if you're not working, and particularly if you're not, you're getting unemployment from the state of Arizona and you've never been to Arizona, you know that that's wrong, right? So we've got a prosecution that's set for trial in October of a woman from East St. Louis, Illinois, who was a money mule for one of these organizations. She received about $700,000 worth of unemployment benefits from Arizona, Ohio, and Texas that were sent to her. She took the funds out of the unemployment cards and transferred them to the people she was working with in Africa. And she kept a healthy cut for herself. So yeah, unfortunately, there's a lot of additional fraud related to the pandemic that we're seeing.
Yeah, that's, a personal story there on my end. I actually, during the pandemic, I got a suit for some unemployment insurance that I was never unemployed. But fortunately, I still had a good relationship with my previous boss, who called me immediately and said, "Hey, I just got this letter. What's going on?" So, it's tough, and it happens to everybody. Just goes to show you.
Yeah, it's all over the place.
Yeah, it's sad. Okay, so that takes us to this. What do I do if I become a victim of a scam or somebody's tried to defraud me?
Well, there's several places that a person can go when they've been a victim of a scam or somebody's trying to scam them. First of all, it's always a good idea to call your local police departments, and they'll usually try to help you, at least try to give you some advice in terms of getting out of the situation. But if you go to your local police department and they say that there's really nothing they can do for you, there's several federal agencies that look into these types of scams. Everybody's heard of the FBI, the Federal Bureau of Investigation. We do a lot of fraud cases with them. They're excellent investigators. If your if your listeners are located in the southern part of the state, let's say from the St. Louis area to the southern end, the number for you want me to give the numbers, Jeff?
Yeah, go ahead. And I'll tell our listeners too that we will, you will, as you see these, he's going to go through these, but I think it's, and I'm going to give another chance at the end to go through these because I think it's so important for people to know who to turn to. So yeah, go right ahead.
Okay, for folks that are, let's say, located in the southern portion of the state from about the St. Louis area on down, you would want to call the FBI that's located in Fairview Heights, and their number is 618-397-4401. For the folks that live north of there, in what we would call central Illinois, they want to call the Springfield office. And that number is 217-522-9675. And the FBI also has an online website where you can report fraud as well. And that's at www.ic3.gov. Also, one of the premier federal law enforcement agencies that investigates fraud, a lot of people wouldn't think of, but the United States Postal Inspection Service, they are tremendous fraud investigators. And I work with them all the time, and we do huge fraud cases. And they're very interested to hear if somebody's been victimized in one of these scams. And we do cases with them all the time. The number for U.S. Postal Inspection Service is 877-876-2455. And they also have a website where folks can report if they've been victimized. And that is www.uspis.gov/report. And then finally, as I mentioned previously, there are a lot of fraud scams, as you mentioned, you've been victimized on, where people's identities are stolen and people apply for unemployment in the person who's been stolen's identity's name. The U.S. Department of Labor is looking very closely at that. Their number is 800-347-3756. And they also have a website, which is www.oig.dol.gov.
Thank you. And again, you'll see those on your screen. And I'm going to go to one more question because we're getting a little shallow on time here. But you talked a bit about identity theft, and that's so scary for everybody for many, many reasons. What are some of the things that you can do, a person can do to stop or maybe defend against this from ever occurring?
Okay, well, Jeff, I'll tell you about one of the things that we're seeing in law enforcement, especially down in this area. We're seeing a rash of car burglaries, and the purpose of many of these burglaries is to obtain person's identity. What they're looking for are, in particular, women's purses, and they're looking for checkbooks and driver's licenses out of women's purses. So the first tip I would say is don't ever, ever, ever leave your purse or your wallet in your car while it's unattended, because the criminals are looking for that stuff. And what they'll do is they'll take woman A's checkbook and they'll write a check to woman B that they have the driver's license for and try to cash that check at woman B's bank. And then they'll do the reverse. They'll take woman B's checkbook, write a check to woman A, and with her driver's license, try to cash that at her bank. So take care of your checkbook. Don't leave your purse in your car. Also, less common, but we do see it when people have when seniors have workers come into their home for some reason. Might be like a healthcare worker, might be someone who's doing cleaning or something like that. Unfortunately, we've seen some cases in my office where most of the people that do this work are good people, but sometimes there are some unscrupulous individuals who do that. We've seen cases where these individuals have stolen the checkbooks of the seniors and used the checkbooks to steal money from their accounts. So one tip that I would give is try to keep your checkbook and any other financial information like that in a locked cabinet or a locked drawer if you've got somebody that's not a relative or a loved one who's coming over. The final tip that I would give is to never give out your Social Security number over the phone or over the internet. Now, sometimes, you might be talking to a bank or something like that you've initiated contact with, and they might ask you for some identifying information. But even if they do ask for that, a legitimate bank is never going to ask you for your full Social Security number. They'll only ask you for the last 4 digits. Never give out your full Social Security number to anyone that you meet over the internet or that calls you on the phone or that you're talking to on the phone.
Gotcha. The great advice. And, as you're talking about these scams, it's sad. It is sinister. It just makes me think if all that time and effort were put into good things, what a much better place this would be. But anyway, I'm gonna wrap up here, and I really appreciate all the things you've told us about today and who to talk to. And again, we're put that information up during this event. So please reach out to anyone, wherever you're at, that you need help from. Please use Scott's information and get the help that you might need. Again, unfortunately, we're getting near the end of our time. But Scott, I want to give you another minute to give any closing remarks that you'd like to.
Yeah, sure, Jeff. I just want to give a couple more tips about
please.
Avoiding.
Take your time.
Yeah. Additional tips I would give are, first of all, just don't send money to people that you've met over the internet or that have, you've only know from talking to on the phone. Even if these people claim to have been your friend, you've been talking to them for a while, they may even, want to be in some sort of relationship with you. Please don't send money to people that you only know through the internet or over the phone. Second tip is, if somebody wants you to deposit funds into your bank account and move the money on for them, or wants you to accept things in the mail and forward it for them, don't do that. Odds are that they're trying to rope you into being one of these money mules for one of these criminal groups that I talked about earlier. So don't do that. And the final tip that I always give seniors is that if something seems a little off or doesn't seem quite right, talk to your loved ones, talk to your daughter, talk to your son, talk to your other relatives, people that love you. And this is especially true if the person you're talking to says, don't talk to your relatives. That's a red flag that there's something wrong. You should always be able to talk to the people that love you. And especially if somebody you're dealing with says, don't talk to your relatives, that's a red flag. Immediately go talk to the people that love you, and they'll help you out. Yeah,
that's great information. And it seems that rings through your entire life, quite honestly. So I appreciate all that great information. And I appreciate, again, you being with us. And I want to thank all our AARP members and listeners for joining us for this very important discussion. If you've learned something new today, and I know you have, share it with your family and friends, as Scott was just talking about. Ask them if you need help. If you think there's something wrong, ask. Ask anybody in your network. Again, anybody that loves you. Tell them what you've learned today. Help them stay safe as well. And look for our next live Facebook conversation with AARP Illinois and our other special guests on our website at aarp.org/IL. For AARP, I'm Jeff Scott. Thank you again, and have a great rest of your day.